Today's topic is quotes. If you've got 5 minutes, I've got 5 tips to help you to use quotes judiciously to add power to your writing. This video today is not about quotation marks. It is not about writing dialogue. I've done a couple of videos about that, and I'll put a link in so that you can see those if you'd like. Today's video is about all those times when you come across something in your reading that really resonates with you or with the piece that you're writing at the moment, and you decide that you want to use it in your writing, and you can use these quotes to add power to your writing. I'm one of those writers who loves a good quote. I like it as a reader and I like it as a writer. You can see here in my most recent book, It All Begins with Goodbye, that I begin each chapter with a quote. And by all accounts from readers, they really enjoyed them. It made them think and it drew them into each chapter because they were about what the chapter was about. Now, I happen to know that writers have lots of questions about using quotes in their writing. Where to find them, how to use them, when to use them, how much of them to use so that they don't plagiarize someone else or be accused of plagiarism. Well, I want to address some of those questions. Here are my 5 tips. Tip number 1, find a good quote from a credible source to add authority to your writing. It's true that once in a while your writing needs third-party endorsement, if you like, and finding a resonant quote and a very spot-on quote that speaks to your particular topic and your particular point of view can add that extra authority and credibility to your writing. Tip number 2, use a well-selected quote to add more power to your writing. So just like adding credibility or authority, a well-selected and well-placed quote can actually add power to your writing. This is especially so if the source is a well-respected one and the quote is spot on to your work. I want to caution you about not using a quote by someone who is more known than you are simply because they're better known than you are. If it's not an appropriate quote, it's not going to have the kind of power or credibility that you're looking for. Tip number 3, be wary of misquotes and false quotes. You'll probably be amazed at how many false quotes and misquotes are floating around the World Wide Web these days, which is probably the place where you're going to find most of the quotes that you're going to use. I want to give you a few examples that might get you thinking about how important this is. Let's talk first about misquotes. Here's one that you've heard many times. Money is the root of all evil. And that is actually a misquote. The actual quote is, the love of money is the root of all evil. And that's a quote from the St. James Bible. Here's another one. I'm sure you've heard this one over and over again. Play it again, Sam. And that's a misquote. From the movie Casablanca, the line was not play it again, Sam. The line was play it, Sam. And here's another one that you hear all the time. The proof is in the pudding. I'm going to leave that one with you to see if you can find what the actual quote is, since it's a misquote. Now, how about some false quotes? They're different than misquotes. These are false quotes that float around. Nobody is sure where they ever came from, and nobody knows who first said them, but they've been attributed to a variety of different people. Here are some that you've probably heard. 2 things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity. What a fantastic quote that is. Except Albert Einstein didn't actually ever say that. It's been attributed to him many times. Many of us may have even quoted it before because it's great. But the fact of the matter is, nobody knows who said it. So it's a false quote. Here's another one. The coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco. If you've ever been to San Francisco, it probably resonates with you, and evidently, according to the World Wide Web, Mark Twain said it. But if you look at credible sources of quotes, you will find that Mark Twain never said that. He never wrote that. No one knows who said it. Tip number 4, make sure you're not using too much of one quote or too many quotes. You can overdo it when it comes to injecting quotes into your writing. you can overwhelm readers with materials that are coming from somewhere else. If you're stringing together a whole lot of quotes from other sources, you're not really putting your own spin on things. You're really not writing your own story. So my suggestion to you is to be very careful and very judicious about the number that you use. Now, the second part of this is how much of a quote should you use? When is a quote too long? I spent 26 years in academia, so I spent a lot of those years writing academically oriented materials as well as other kinds of things. And in academic writing, there are some conventions, and there are different types of conventions because there are APA rules, there are MLA rules, and it depends on the publication that you're writing for or the publisher that you're writing for. There are specific conventions, and the rule of thumb in all of them, though, in terms of length of a quote, was that if a quote is more than 4 lines long, then it needs to be set off from the rest of your narration and quoted and attributed that way. However, in less formal writing, you're probably never going to use a quote that's more than 4 lines long, and I would suggest that you never do this. In fact, I'm going to suggest that you reconsider using any quote that is more than 3 to 4 lines long. The shorter and the punchier, the better. Tip number 5, check your quote source carefully. I can't stress this enough. The truth is that most of the times you are going to be using what are referred to as secondary sources for your quotes. Because unless you were there in Washington on August 28, 1963, you did not hear Martin Luther King give his "I Have a Dream" speech. And if you want to quote him, you are going to have to use a secondary source, somebody who has written that speech up for you. If you were there and you observed it, that's what we consider a primary source. That's a different thing. You know you are then the source of that quote. However, if you're using a quote from the World Wide Web, unless you read it in a particular book and you know that that is the quote exactly as it is, you're going to have to check your sources. For example, you might decide that you're going to use a quote from a book and you haven't actually read the whole book, and so you go to Goodreads and you find some quotes. Are you sure that they've been quoted correctly? Are you sure that's exactly what it says in that book? You're going to have to be careful about quoting correctly. For example, who said, "A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting his shoes on," or his pants, depending upon the quote. That quote has been variously attributed to Mark Twain, Winston Churchill, Thomas Jefferson. Do you know who said that? Well, you better find out, and you better find a credible source that will give you a sense of accuracy for who really said it. So what I'm saying is quotes can be your friend, quotes can be very useful to you, quotes can be powerful, they can resonate with you and with your readers if you use them appropriately, judiciously, and accurately. Happy writing. Subscribe to Write, Fix, Repeat, and maybe I can help you improve your writing knowledge and skills, 5 tips at a time.